Good morning. I trust you all had a great Valentine's Day. Okay then. If you don't know, and I'm not telling you, don't say it was my fault. Going down to Mark chapter 6 again this week. So when we were in Mark chapter 6 last week, you're kind of breaking the mold, I know. But, if I did the same thing every week, it would get dull, wouldn't it? Mark chapter 6, verse 33. And while you're talking, I am going to move some of this around because I know I'm going to get going and I'm going to walk into this. So, I know. You did give me a great warning. Mark chapter 6. I believe it's in page 800 and something in your Pew Bible. I was given a note, but then I lost it. I bet it's somewhere around page 852. 54, a voice from the back. Well, I'm not saying in your Bible. I'm saying in the Pew Bible. In mine, it's 873. That's just how it goes, people. If we're going to keep clouding the issue with the facts, we're never getting anywhere. I bought my wife a great Valentine's gift yesterday. Bought her new washer and dryer, or new washer. I told her that wash tub is far too old for her to be using. But I digress quickly. Mark chapter 6, verse 33. We'll go to verse 52. I'm thinking that was going to be pretty good, 33 to 32. When people saw them going, and many recognized them, and they ran there together on foot from all the cities, and got there ahead of them. And when he had went ashore, he saw the great multitude, and he felt compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began teaching them many things. And when it was already quite late, his disciples came to him and began saying, "This place is desolate, and is already quite late. Send them away so they may go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy something to eat." And he answered them and he says, "You give them something to eat." And he said to him, "How shall we go and spend 200 denarii on bread and give them something to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go look." And they found out, and they said, 5 and 2 fishes. And he commanded them all to recline in groups on green grass, and recline in companies of 50s and 100s. And he took 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and he looked towards heaven, and he blessed the food and broke the loaves, and he kept giving them to the disciples to set before them. And he divided up the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they picked up the 12 basketfuls of broken pieces, and also of the fish. And there were 5,000 men who ate of the loaves. Immediately, he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him in order that to the other side of Bethesda, while he himself was sending the multitude away. And after bidding them farewell, he departed to the mountain and prayed. And it was in the evening that the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he alone was on the land. And seeing them straining with the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the 4th hour of the night, he came to them walking on the sea, and he intended to pass them by. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed that it was a ghost, and they cried out, for they saw him and were frightened. And immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind stopped. And they were greatly astonished, for they had not gained insight from the incidents of the loaves, but their heart was hardened. All right. Well, you've been in children's church at any time in your life or Sunday school. You've probably heard these stories recounted. Mark leaves certain things out that other gospels have in, and other gospels have different things that Mark doesn't have. So we're going to look at today. It's a very common story. We know the story quite well, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and we know what Jesus does. And so we understand the miraculousness of what occurs. But the disciples don't. And while we may know the story, we kind of fit in the same category. I think all the way through Jesus' ministry, he had a flat forehead and broad shoulders, because always he was doing this. Because here's the deal. They have just returned from being sent out into the countryside to do great and wonderful things. They have healed. They have cast out demons. They have come back. They've done this. Not Jesus, they've done this. And immediately we go into a story that requires a little bit of faith. And instantaneously, they have gone brain dead. Why? Because again, they see the great and wonderful thing over here. They go, wow, that's awfully cool. And then they get into it and they go, I don't know how to fix this problem. And here's the thing. We do this. And you say, well, why do you keep saying? Because this is where the Bible is taking us. These are the 12 men that changed the rest of the world. And it was a long, slow process, working through every aspect. And we get to the end where Peter goes, I'll never leave you. These other cats will, but I won't. And that dude takes off. It's because faith is not something that you have possessed in the times past, and it's good enough. It must be something that we're always forward seeking, and something that we always have in forward situations. It's something we always have in our current life and looking forward. Why? Because if we only just rely upon it in our past, every time something new comes up, we go, I don't know how we're going to solve this problem. They've just seen these great and wonderful things happen. They've seen Jesus cast out demons. They've seen Jesus, 3 of them, heal a little girl who has died. And you got this situation. Look at this situation. Notice what we have here. We have a group of people coming up, a great multitude. Now, at this time, they were trying to get away from the crowd to rest, because if you look back up in 30 through 32, Jesus said, come away from yourself to a lonely place and rest a while. This was after they got back from their travels. So no sooner than they get off the boat than they're greeted with a whole bunch of people with a whole bunch of problems. And deep down, the disciples were probably going, dude, can I get a break? Can we get like 5 minutes? I mean, come on. I know Jesus is a great party favorite, but can we get some time here? What was Jesus' response when he saw the people? When he went ashore, he saw a great multitude, and he had compassion on them because they looked like sheep without a shepherd. They looked like individuals who were totally leaderless. Ever watch a bunch of kids around when there's no adult around? It's like a little mob, isn't it? And you know that you're in trouble when you quit hearing them. Right? I mean, if you can hear them, they're fine, unless somebody's screaming bloody murder. But when they're on, you can hear them, they're fine. But when it goes quiet, that's when every parent goes, I got to go check this out. Right? Have you ever watched them just kind of run around in sports without a coach? Give kids who have no concept of what a basketball is and tell them to play basketball. And watch what happens. It's kind of funny for the first few minutes, and then it feels kind of sad about that, right? Amen. There you go. It's kind of like, when I was in the Army, I worked with a support battalion. And so I hung out with some of the warrants. And warrants are great folks to hang out with because something great is going to happen when you hear a warrant officer say, hey, watch this. New soldiers come in, they say, hey, gives them 2 trash bags. I need you to go out to the Hemet wrecker out there and get an exhaust sample. Fill the bags up, so you're walking in with bags full of exhaust, just like this. Now, it's funny to watch, but after a while, it kind of is sad to watch because, they weren't given direction and they weren't trained up. In this section here, Jesus looks at these people and sees them as wandering sheep. Now, why is that? Well, they had teachers. They had synagogues to go to, but in reality, the synagogue officials and the religious elite of that time were more concerned with the legalities of the religion and the religiosity of the religion than they were necessarily with the feeding spiritually of the sheep. Because notice Jesus immediately goes into teaching. He doesn't feed them physically first. He sees them directionless and leaderless, hungry for the Word of God, and yet their leaders are more concerned with praise hymns or hymns. Bible translations, pews, Folding chairs. The rules that make you saved or the rules that don't make you saved. See, we fall into that as well. And it's very easy for pastors, and you got pastors to do this, and they have a focal point that they like, and they focus in on that. We got to do evangelism at the extent of discipleship. Or we need to focus on going out into the other parts of the earth, but not taking the care of the folks at home. And so we can easily zone in on one aspect of the Christian faith and focus there. And then you leave the sheep leaderless and directionless. Because in the end, it's the goal and the purpose to feed the sheep and nourish them spiritually. And you can't do that if you're focused in on the legalities of the religion or the religiosity of the religion for its purpose of being religious. And so he has compassion on them because they have no good leaders. And there's some parallelism between 34 and 36 where Jesus sees an opportunity. He doesn't let an opportunity for a teaching moment to pass by. Up comes a crowd, totally directionless and leaderless, and Jesus takes an opportunity to demonstrate and teach two things. One to the disciples and one to the people around. And he looks at them and he says, "You give them something to eat." Notice the disciples' response. And this is a common disciple response. Send them away. Well, that's what their leaders did, right? Sent them away unfed. Sent them away unfed spiritually, and the disciples now want to send them away unfed physically. Send them away. That's an easy response. It's an easy way of handling a situation. This is too great for me to handle, so I'll just send you away. Wednesday night, somebody asked me a question, and it was kind of one that I didn't have an answer to right away, and so I answered it the way I learned to in other places, and you just look at people when you don't have an answer that's good enough. You go, well, that question is beyond the scope of this class. Translation, leave me alone. This is as best a good an answer you're going to get on this till later. That's what it means. Send them away. Oh, it's late in the afternoon, and the people have traveled far, and there's places for them to go and get food. And Jesus tells them, well, you feed them. And they look at a natural situation with natural eyes and seeing an opportunity for a natural situation to be solved with a supernatural result. See, because faith looks at a situation and sees both the natural and the supernatural. Sight sees only the natural. And a lot of times we get so focused in on seeing with our eyes that we forget about the supernatural aspect. This is too much. We don't have enough workers. We're not making enough money. We don't have enough. I don't have enough to give here. I don't do enough here. You know, there's just too much to do in this area. And we see it only from a perspective of a very natural response. I don't like talking in front of people. No joke, folks. You think that would come natural to me. I'm an introvert by nature. I would like to, my idea of a perfect day is away from everybody. Crowds make me quite anxious and nervous. In Italy, they have no qualms about getting right up on you. I like a good 3-foot rule. And so my first little time there is like going, I'll hit you. You better back up. And they'll get right up on top of you. And I have no problem with that. People are going, why don't you go to Venice for Carnivale? I said, well, what's it like? He said, it's a big crowd and you're all... No, I'm not doing it. Oh, no, I won't have fun. Someone will get hurt. My great idea of a great time is me alone with nobody around. However, the job that God has chosen to put me in, the ministry He chose to put me in, requires me to be around people. And I could have easily said, I can't do this naturally. It's against my personality naturally. Folks, I'll be honest with you, there are days when I'm like, I don't know, I don't think I can do this. Why? Because it takes a lot for an introvert to get up in front and be an extrovert. And it'd be easy to say, well, I can't do that. But yet, supernaturally, God has allowed that to occur. Why? Because it is something that I have to do by faith, not in my own strength. Why? Because if I did, I would be behind that pulpit, cringing with maybe the top of my head poking over it, hoping you will go away. But you've paid for the price of admission, so here I'll pace back and forth for you. He looks at them and he says, you feed them. And they respond to a natural situation instead of with a supernatural problem, with a natural problem. Well, we don't have 200 denarii. And I know you got some high-tech gee-whiz Bibles out there that says 1 denarii is equivalent to X number of dollars. Here's the thing with exchange rates, that's not a good comparison. The best comparison is 1 denarii was simply one man's wage for a day at that time. So we either need 200 men to give us their day's wage, or we need 200 days' wage to go buy food. An impossibility, no matter how you look at it, because they're not lugging around 200 coins like that, and they're certainly not going to be able to lug back $200 worth of food. Y'all give that a try. Send 12 men to pick. You send 12 men to pick up any amount of food, you'll cut back with fries. And so he looks at them, and he's have to have a flat forehead. Why? Because just a day earlier, just one day earlier, they went out without provisions and stayed in homes there as Christ told them, and were cared for as long as they stayed there, miraculously. Just a day earlier, they had healed people themselves. Just a day earlier, they had cast out demons, and they were juiced and said, wow, it's so exciting in this problem. Because I don't know how to handle this, man. Somebody got a checkbook? Because when I was a kid, I thought as long as you had checks, you had money. It wouldn't take long to figure that out once I got to be an adult. So they have an opportunity to capitalize upon the supernatural within them that God has endowed them with to do great things, and immediately they revert back to sight, not faith. And we do the same thing. We see the supernatural event of God working within our life, going, I don't know how you're going to figure this out. And if we ever tried to fix God's help, it would never turn out the way God wanted it, and would never turn out as great as God had planned it. And we can see that, believe it, but then the next situation we look at and go, oh, it's the worst thing ever. And there they are. Now notice Jesus knows how many loaves of bread there are, right? Because he asked him, he says, how many loaves do you have? Now, Mark does not record who says what. John does. And there's a lot of things that Mark doesn't record. All 4 Gospels have this event in them. But notice what Jesus says. You give them something to eat. And they said, we don't have enough denarii to give them bread or something to eat. And basically, if we went and bought 200 denarii worth, somebody might get something to eat, but they wouldn't be full. How many loaves do you have? Go look. And they found out that they have 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Doesn't mention the little boy. Doesn't mention that Andrew was the one that found the little boy. John does that. Now these 2 loaves of bread are not like, 5 loaves of sandwich bread and, 2 large fish. It's enough to feed a small boy. Would not be enough to feed a grown-sized man, or at least not the way I ate last night as I ate prime rib. Yeah, I was suffering for it in the movie later, so. Enough to feed one little boy, not enough to feed a man. And he commanded them all to recline in groups on green grass. Now the imagery of this text, just that isn't that neat? A little piece of paper fall out on me. We're going to take a little rabbit, other than that one, and then shoot him real quick and get back on the main point. In the text, it talks about not groups, but gardens upon gardens, which is kind of an odd translation. But when you think about what the imagery of what you have this lush green grass, and you have 15,000 people wearing multicolored robes sitting down and looks like little square beds. And so to the vision, to the eye of the person writing, it looks like garden upon garden. Okay, bang, and now back onto the trail. How many loaves do you have? Once they reclined, notice what Jesus does. He blessed the food, he takes the loaves, and he kept giving them to the disciples set before them, and divided 2 fish among them all. So he prays, he starts breaking the bread, and he keeps breaking the bread and giving it to the disciples to pass out to company upon company and hundreds and fifties until all are fed. Now Mark says that there were only 5,000 men, which means there were probably also equal number of women and kids. So anywhere between 10 to 15,000 people. These 5 loaves and 2 fishes that aren't strong enough yet to fill a little kid fed 15,000 people and filled 12 baskets. See, a natural response, a natural need. Something that could have been fixed naturally with a sufficient large sum of money, and yet Jesus' response to them is, go find how many loaves you can find and watch what I do. You should have been able to see it yourself. Mark tells us that towards the end. But they didn't. Amazingly, folks, a lot of the answers to our natural problems are dealt with supernaturally, or need to be. Because if we try to do it within our own strength, have you ever noticed we fail miserably at it? It needs to be met with prayer, study, petition to God. Not as leaderless sheep wandering around going, I have no clue what's going to happen next. Like that. By the way, I know I've told you this before. Have y'all smelled sheep? They're not very pleasant animals to be around. And they're not the swiftest one in the barnyard. So he saw smelly dumb things and had compassion on them. Not because they were smelly and dumb, but because they were wandering around leaderless. And an opportunity for the disciples to step up and step out in faith and do something great was met with a natural response to a natural situation. Send them away. By the way, they do that with the little kids when they come to see Jesus. This seems to be a disciple answer anytime something gets in their way. Send them away. Just send them away. Send them away. Gives also a caveat for us that when we are in a situation where we can be a leader in a situation similar to this, the response of send them away is insufficient. But I got things I got to do. I got it. We're all busy people. It's easy to send the folks away. It's easy to send those who are hurting away. That's an easy answer. But it's not the right answer. Notice the response to a natural situation Jesus takes and utilizes to demonstrate to the crowd his power and ability to feed them with food that is insufficient, and the ability to teach the disciples his ability to do these things even though they've seen it themselves. They've watched it happen. They've done things similarly and yet just went brain dead. Why? Because they know he could do it, but just not here. We say this and we mouth this in the things we do. I know, I've heard this pretty much all my life. I know God can do it. But what if he doesn't? See, the second phrase presupposes God won't. It just does. I know God can deliver me, but what if he doesn't? See, the what if he doesn't presupposes he won't. And therefore I need to find another route to make it help and help God out. See, it presupposes God's not going to do so. Yeah, God can do it. Yeah, sure. But he won't. That's not faith, folks. That's sight. I know God can do it. And I'll pray that that will be his will. But if not, I will allow my will to be conformed to his, not his to mine. That's faith. I know he can, but what if he doesn't? It's a lack of faith. So notice what happens. These stories a lot of times are split apart, but yet they are conjoined stories. Why? Well, Mark tells us that. Drop down to 45. And immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him on the other side to Bethesda, while he himself was sending the multitude away. Mark does not record why he sends the multitude away. John does. John says that the crowd was going to take Jesus and make him king. And many commentators believe that the disciples helped stoke that fire. So he said, okay, I'm going to separate you two and put you in timeout. You go away, get on a boat, and go away. Go to your room and wait for your dad to come home. And you go away. You can't stay here, but go find your parents. Go to your own home. And after bidding them farewell, he departed to the mountain and prayed. And in the evening, the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on the land. And seeing them straining in the oars, for the wind was against them. Best translation on this is, they ran into a contrary wind. An ill wind, a wind of great ferocity. So as he's on shore, he's looking out, and he can see them rowing, and there they are rowing. And here comes another teaching moment. This is a natural problem, of which he's going to provide a supernatural answer to which they respond in a very natural way. Check this out. And when it was evening, the boat was in the midst of the sea, and he was alone on the land. And seeing them straining at the oars, for the wind was against them, at about the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea, but he intended to pass them by. Now that would have really weirded me out if I was in the boat. I'm watching Jesus, and he goes, see ya. And just kept right on trucking. Little help? You see me rowing? Little help? But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed it was the sinless Son of God and said, hey, Jesus, come in and help us row. No. That would have really been great, but no. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they supposed him to be a ghost. And they cried out, for they all saw him and were frightened. Guy looks like me, walks like me, dressed like me, walking on the water. I know that will weird you out, but you've seen me do other things that had control of nature. I've already calmed the storm once in a boat we all were in that you thought you were all going to die. And here I am walking on the sea, and instead of going, hey, Jesus, how about a hand? It's a ghost! It's come to kill us all! Huh? The disciples look at the one who they've been with for a while, who they've seen for a while, who they just left a couple of hours ago. They forgot what he looked like. That's one great relationship, isn't it? He kind of looks like Jesus, but I think it's a ghost. And their response is not of faith. Their response is one of natural fear. It's coming. And usually what happens when there's a ghost, there's usually the follow-on statement that someone's dying, right? We've seen horror movies. When there's a ghost that shows up, it doesn't end well for somebody, right? And so they're all in the boat trying to figure out which one they're going to give up to the ghost. And notice in this one, it doesn't mention Peter walking on the water. And a lot of liberal scholars go, well, see, apparently this text doesn't possess that because, well, it didn't happen. John doesn't have it either. Matthew does. What happens when you read these stories in the New Testament is that they overlay over one another, and it provides the basic story with greater details. We call that in a more technical term sensus plenior, which means fuller understanding of the text. And so while Matthew tells you that Peter gets out of the boat, Mark is going to focus on another aspect of why Jesus gets into the boat here in a minute, and it has nothing to do with Peter walking. See, because a lot of scholars say, well, since Peter's writing this, he didn't want this mentioned. Well, then Peter had to convince John not to mention it. So now you've got a conspiracy. John mentions that they're going to crown Jesus to be king, and he sends them away. Mark mentions that Jesus is going to pass them by. And Mark mentions something here in a little bit that we're going to take a look at. And Matthew mentions that it's Peter coming out. But when you read them all over, you see a blueprint of a story in which all the details are presented to you. They're not designed to be read. Went to public schools. Read separately. Over top one another. Jesus looks at the boat. He walks to the boat. And he responds with this. And we read it this way. Take courage. It's I. Don't be afraid. Drink a little bit of water because it's going to get loud in a minute. That's not how Jesus says it. It's in the emphatic case. Take courage. Don't be afraid. You chuckleheads. Left you like 6 hours ago, and now you forget what I look like. Think about it, fellas. If you forget what your wife looks like in 6 hours, you got problems. Right? It's kind of like you got to remember what they wear and how many dresses they have, and go. Don't ever ask, is that new? Take courage. It's not in the request form. It's in the emphatic case to represent the fact that they had none. They had none. They had none in the ability that they had previously just possessed. They had none in the God that could deliver them, that has shown great miracles to deliver them before. They had no faith in the God that they walk with continually, and He has to remind them again on the water, be of courage. It is I. It's not in a passive. It's in an emphatic tone. Because they missed both instances of God's provision. And He gets in the boat and the wind stops. It ceases. Doesn't gently rest. Doesn't gently come to an end. It ceases immediately. Remember the first account of the boat, He looks at him and says, why do you have no faith? Now He looks at him and says, take courage. Still, the implied task is that they have no courage. And they can't quite pair all this great, wonderful testimony of God's faithfulness with them that they've just witnessed and they've just done through Him. And when they get into a little bit of trouble, try to answer it naturally. We do this in our lives, folks. We have seen the supernatural power of God work in our lives. And then when we come up to a new issue or a new problem or a new situation, we look at it and try to figure it out, first of all, rationally and naturally. And our first response is to look at it spiritually and head to prayer and head to text. But so often, we look at the situation with natural eyes. Jesus sees this with the disciples. Notice what the text says. Notice what the text says. He got in a boat and the wind stopped. They were greatly astonished. Best translation for that is their astonishment was overflowing and could not be contained. That would be me too. If I just thought I saw a ghost and I found out it was Jesus, yeah, I would be really ecstatic too. 52. This is a great indictment. For they had not gained insight from the instance of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. They had yet to gain insight over the loaves. See, Mark pairs these two stories together, and yet many preachers break them apart. They go together. Why? Because the lesson from the 5 loaves and 2 fishes was not comprehended due to the hardness of their heart. There's several ways a heart can be hardened, folks. The Bible tells us that Pharaoh's heart is hardened 6 times. The first 3 times, God is the one that does the hardening. The last 3 is Pharaoh. So it implies that sometimes God shields us from seeing things. We see this in the Old Testament where God blinds the children of Israel from seeing certain things. And so sometimes the heart is hardened because God has a purpose for that hardening. And sometimes we harden our own heart. And we harden our heart towards the supernatural aspect of what God can do in our lives because we simply don't want to believe in the fact that we serve a God who controls the land, sea, air, and death, and every other aspect of our little world, and can make provision for us at a moment's notice. And sometimes He will, and sometimes He won't. And we harden our hearts at the times when He won't because, well, He should do it for us all the time. Well, the problem of the matter, folks, if He does it for us all the time, we won't appreciate it, will we? We'll get to where we expect God's great provision and expect it in a needy, self-centered way. You got little kids. If you gave them candy every day because they wanted it, is that a good thing or a bad thing? If you're grandma and grandpa, that's a great thing because then you send them home with the parents and you wave. Bye-bye. They could not comprehend the miracle of the 5 loaves and 2 fishes because they had a hardened heart. We all have hardened hearts at times. We've allowed the things of the world to harden our heart against the things of God because we have believed at times there are things that where God should have acted and He didn't, and now I'm angry at God and I have nothing but vengeful thoughts against God because He should have helped and He didn't. We have a hardened heart against God because sometimes it's intended so we miss the point so God can later bring it up and catch us at it. David is totally oblivious of where Nathan is headed when Nathan shows up and starts telling a story about a little lamb and a rich landowner. But Nathan is poignantly aware when Nathan looks at him and goes, "You the man." Walks him right into an ambush. Some of us are here and we have allowed our heart to be hardened against the things of God because we have believed that God should have done things for us or for others that we loved and He didn't. And so now we hold a grudge against God and so we cannot see it. We cannot see the things of God. Some of us have a hardened heart and cannot accept Christ as Savior because our heart is so hardened against the things of God because we allow things to taint us. It's not rational. It's not logical. Actually, when you go back and read many of the patristic fathers, they are heavily into ration and logic. It doesn't wash. It's a way of hardening the heart to where you don't have to accept a Lord and Savior who has the capability of delivering dead people to life, capable of turning 5 small loaves and 2 little fishes into a meal for 15,000 plus 12, who can calm the sea, who can cast out demons, who can raise Lazarus from the dead, who could, if He wanted to, come off the cross and slay every man, woman, and child at the foot of the cross. We have a hard heart towards those things. Wesley did as well. If you were in our church history class on Wednesday night, Wesley, before he was ever saved, was a chaplain in the British Army and preached many a sermon, but later on realized he was never saved. And at Aldersgate, a church in England, they were reading the preamble to Martin Luther's commentary on Romans, and he said he felt his heart strangely warm. The hardening of his heart had been removed, and he became a man on fire, and he and his brother John were responsible for one of the great revival movements in England that spilled over into the Americas that Whitefield and Jonathan Edwards took over. You open up that hymn book and there are songs written by John and Charles Wesley that we sing to this day. But his heart was hardened until Aldersgate. What have we allowed to harden our heart? For some of us, it's vengefulness. For some of it, is we just simply can't believe that God can do it. I know He can, but. And for others, they do not know Jesus Christ. And so they cannot see the great and wonderful things. See, because Jesus isn't just about party tricks and magical tricks and things to feed people and stopping waves. A life that is tied to Jesus is about a walk and a relationship with the one true God who has sent His Son into this world to redeem you back, to take upon Himself your crime, and allowed Himself to be executed in your place so that you could have a restored relationship with the God that you have not trusted with your life. And all the miracles and signs and wonders are to be validation of that faith that you would place in Christ. If you are here today, as the praise band comes to sing, some of us are here and we have a hard heart because we just simply can't believe. Just simply can't believe that God would do these great things. Well, sure, I believe in God, but I just don't believe He's a God for me. Some of us are here and we've had hardened hearts for the things we've done as believers. Some of you, this is maybe your first time here. Some of you have been coming here for a while and have thought about being members here. At the time when they begin singing, I'll have my mic turned off. For whatever reason that you wish to come forward, whether it is to talk about a relationship with our wonderful Savior Jesus Christ, or to get your life back on track in faith with Him, as they sing, I'll have my mic turned off. It'll be a conversation between me, you, and the Lord. No one else will know. At this time, if you will please come forward.
Jesus is Savior and Lord of my life, my hope, my glory, my all. Wonderful Master, in joy and in strife, on Him you to make all. Jesus is Lord of all. Jesus is Lord of all. Lord of my thoughts and my service each day, Jesus is Lord of all. Blessed Redeemer, all glorious King, worthy of reverence I pray. Tribute and praises I joyfully bring to Him, the light, the way. Jesus is Lord of all. Jesus is Lord of all. Lord of my thoughts and my service each day, Jesus is Lord of all.
Thank you this morning. Brother Walker, who close us out in word of prayer. Lord, Heavenly Father, we thank you for the time that we gave in your mouth, Lord, and hearing the word preached. Lord, we pray many Christians throughout the world, Lord, that we gave birth to.